The Super Bowl is over. Pitchers and catchers are reporting to Port St. Lucie for the Mets this week. But do the Mets have another trade up their sleeves to round out the offseason? We are getting into just that right here on the True Mets Talk podcast. All right, Mets fans, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast. It's your boy CP, and we are talking about a potential trade that the Mets still might have up their sleeves regarding a lefty bullpen arm around this league. It's a familiar name because I talked about this name last offseason, and he was one of my free agent targets that I really wanted the Mets to pursue. Before we fully get into this video, please do hit those thumbs up buttons on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these weekly and daily discussions, polls, all the live streams we do. Hit that subscribe button and make sure to comment your thoughts and opinions down below. The bullpen is looking fantastic for the New York Mets. They have their top six guys pretty much set in order from Edwin Diaz all the way down to Jose Butto. But really, when you're talking about the bullpen and rounding it out and maybe adding the second lefty, and who is that lefty going to be in addition to AJ Minter? We've talked about internal competitions, especially in spring training between the likes of Danny Young and Genesis Cabrera. Could there be an external candidate that the New York Mets are still looking at to be that second lefty and forego that internal competition? And this is where we are pulling up this latest tweet from Pat Ragazzo in relation to what MLB executives around the league are stating if the Mets are still open and willing to trade Starling Marte this offseason. As we know, a couple of months ago, Pat Ragazzo, Mets reporter of Sports Illustrated, stated that the Mets were in heavy talks with the Royals at the MLB winter meetings to deal Starling Marte in exchange for Hunter Harvey. They've been trying to find a proper situation and were even willing to pay down a lot of that salary up to maybe even 50%. And, you know, we're still waiting to see if Starling Marte is going to be on this team. I, for one, will say up front that I think that Starling Marte, now that we have Jesse Winker on board and deploying that platoon lefty and righty DH option with Starling Marte and Jesse Winker, is the most likeliest of scenarios. Excuse me. But if you take a look at this tweet right here from Pat Ragazzo, just recently within the past day or two, rival execs I've spoken with suggest the Mets should trade Starling Marte to the Padres for lefty reliever Wandy Peralta. And then he goes on to say, or there could be a larger package with both Wandy Peralta and Dylan Cease if the Mets are willing to go ahead and pursue Dylan Cease. I will be very upfront with you all. I haven't talked about Dylan Cease for a couple of days, and for good reason. The asking price from the Padres and AJ Preller in relation to Dylan Cease, asking for the likes of Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams, etc., is just far too much, right? You know, I'm not trading Brandon Sproat. I don't think the Mets are going to trade Brandon Sproat. He was my number one prospect on my Mets top 10 prospect countdown to begin the 2025 season. That was a two-part series on this channel. If you missed it, I'll link both of those videos in the description down below. I don't think the Mets are in any rush to trade the farm, so to speak, right? Or at least two top five prospects in this farm system with what the Padres are asking for a rental in Dylan Cease, as good as Dylan Cease is. So I think the rotation is going to be at a standstill until the trade deadline. I firmly believe that, and I won't believe anything else until I actually see it with my own eyes. But this Wandy Peralta discussion is very interesting. So let's take a look at Wandy Peralta's numbers in a nutshell over the past two seasons. All right, so again, going into Wandy Peralta, I mentioned last offseason before he went to the Padres in free agency, I was very interested in the Mets pursuing Wandy Peralta and giving him a deal, a multi-year deal at that. He ended up signing a 4-year deal worth about 16, just over $1 million with the Padres that was very opt-out driven. You see, he played his first season in a Padres uniform back in 2024, last season. He posted a 3.99 ERA, a 1.20 whip, and only 38.1 innings pitched in comparison to 54 innings in 2023. I believe he had a left adductor strain that kept him out in the middle months for about a month and a half, mid-July to early September. But this is the remaining contract outlook for Wandy Peralta. 3 years worth about $13.35 million. That's $4.45 million per season. He already exercised his player option for the 2025 season, so he opted back into his deal with the Padres. But each year after that, until this contract runs out, after 2025, he has another player option. After 2026, he has another player option. So they gave him about 3 player options in the midst of this deal for him to decide whether he wants to go back into this deal or test the free agent market. And we can only assume, right, especially with the numbers that he posted in 2024, it makes sense for him to opt back into that deal, being the safe option. And I would have to imagine, unless he posts anything similar to what he did back in 2022 or 2023 in a Yankees uniform, he's going to continue to opt into that deal. And it's pretty cheap. It's pretty team friendly. $4.45 million is really nothing in the grand scheme of things when you relate that back to what some of these relievers are making on the open market. But a lot of numbers did get worse objectively for Wandy Peralta in a Padres uniform when he made that change from the East Coast in the Yankees uniform over to the West Coast in San Diego. The walk percentage actually got better by about 5.2%, but everything else significantly got worse, right? The ERA, first and foremost, got worse, right? You see from 2.83 to 3.99. And that's in large part due to the huge, massive reduction in strikeout rate from Wandy Peralta. He went from about 22.5% in the K rate down to only 13.6% in 2024. He was not missing as many bats in San Diego as he was in New York for whatever reason. And I looked at his arsenal. He's a 4-pitch pitcher. I didn't really see anything drastic that stood out to me in terms of the differentials. I believe he used his changeup about 2.5% less. He utilized more of his four-seam fastball by about 4% more, but it wasn't anything eye-opening. It wasn't anything drastic. So again, I'd have to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what went wrong. But part of that answer could be found right here. The hard hit percentage between 2023 and 2024 for Wandy Peralta, it's skyrocketed. Opposing batters, right? We're hitting the ball exponentially harder off of Wandy Peralta. I'm not sure if there was a flaw in his mechanics. I'm not sure if he was tipping pitches, but it went from 34.3% in the hard hit rate category up to 43.4%. And you talk about a lefty pitcher, and you're wondering, can he be a lefty specialist? He didn't really have all that great of success against lefty bats last season in the splits. Lefty batters were hitting 260 in the batting average category off of Wandy Peralta with a 762 OPS and a 362 on base percentage. So when we're assessing whether we'd rather go down the internal route with this competition between Genesis Cabrera and Danny Young or trade a valuable asset at this point of the offseason, I know that I've stated that I would prefer to see Starling Marte go elsewhere via trade this offseason. But if the Mets aren't going to do anything else and bring in another viable right-handed DH option, if they're truly committed to this platoon DH role between Winker and Marte, this wouldn't make sense if that's the headline Marte for Wandy Peralta. And that's because, again, the numbers versus the lefties aren't really convincing to me. And if you take a look at the splits with Danny Young, and his success against lefties, it's a lot better than Wandy Peralta's, at least in the 2024 season. So, you get the sample size with Wandy Peralta. You can always hope if you make a trade for him that he reverts back to his New York Yankees self in the days when he was with the Yankees from 2021 all the way until 2023. But everything that we saw in 2024 was not good from Wandy Peralta in terms of the trajectory that he's heading down. So if you're asking me, I know I've been a proponent again of trading Starling Marte all off season. I think that this would make sense, but the Mets would have to be confident, maybe in an internal candidate like Ronnie Mauricio to fill in on a platoon basis at DH if you're going to get rid of a guy that has pretty good splits against left-handed pitching in Starling Marte via trade for an arm like Wandy Peralta. So, Mets fans, let me know with everything that we said in this episode. Would you be willing to trade for Wandy Peralta straight up? Do you think that the Mets can strike a deal for Wandy Peralta in a package with Dylan Cease? I'm very skeptical about the asking price of the Padres and David Stearns' willingness to meet that asking price. And honestly, I don't blame him. The Padres seem like they are quite unserious about truly letting Cease go unless they get an arm and a leg in a return. And I don't think that the Mets quite simply are ready to do that for a rental type player, no matter how badly this fan base and myself thinks that they need a frontline starter. So let me know in the comments section. Hit those thumbs up buttons, subscribe to the channel, and until next video, this is the True Mets Talk podcast. Let's go Mets. Baseball is around the corner. Peace.